Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is the secondary video to my first time buyer video where I discussed the steps it took us to buy a flat for the first time in Scotland. So I wanted to make a follow-up video because it's been about 18 months since we got our flat. Is that right? There were a lot of things I wanted to talk about that weren't necessarily specific to the steps that I spoke about in the original video. So my original video discussed that mortgage application process, viewing flats, and the general legal process and relevant tips in Scotland for buying a property for the first time. But I wanted to talk about some follow-up things with this video. And with this video, it's more like advice from our experience. So little tips that I've picked up from viewing flats, from not getting offers accepted, from taking part in the closing process for a lot of flats here in Scotland. And I hope you find it useful if you are buying a flat. Make sure you turn on and check as many appliances as you can, whether or not they're coming with the flat. So by this I mean, you know, cookers, showers and taps are a huge one, flushing the toilet, just to make sure that everything is working for the day you move in. You don't want to have to be met with any surprises or leaks or anything being broken like that first initial period that you move in. Look at the walls, the boiler, check the boiler, obviously the shower, and also the condition of all these items past surface level, like aesthetics, like past it just being like cleaned for the viewing. In addition to asking like how old all these things are, because then you have a really good idea of, you know, how long it'll be until you need to replace it, if you need to replace it ASAP, and you really get to know the bare bones of what you're potentially purchasing. The second tip is to read the home report really well and use this to guide questions for both the seller's solicitors and the seller when you speak at the viewing, and hopefully you do get to speak with them at the viewing. There may be red flags in there, so use that to obviously like consider any future spending you would need to make on the property themselves. And a lot of the properties here in Edinburgh and Glasgow to a certain extent are old Victorian tenement buildings, so it's very likely that you'd need cash put aside to, you know, repair these things in the future. So getting to understand how old they actually are, when's the last time maybe the roof was done, the windows were done, if the windows are all sealed properly, if they're double single glazing, if they're safe. Making sure you know all of that before you go in. It's not necessarily going to put you off the purchase, but it'll at least give you an idea of how much money you need to put aside if you do need to put some aside. You'll be able to gauge how competitively priced a property is by how hard it is to view, and if there's multiple people viewing the flat in your viewing slot. So if like there's loads of people in the flat at the same time, obviously this is not relevant to pandemic specific conditions, but when we were viewing flats, there were some flats where the actual viewing, it was hard to actually move around the flat because there were so many people there. This can affect how early you put your offer in and how much time you have to think about things, and how much time you even have to an extent to ask the seller certain questions, and also how much money and like how much actual cash you'd put on top of the offer, which is commonplace here in Edinburgh, and I spoke about that in the first video that I put out. We used our solicitors really well for this point and asked them so many questions. Even if they felt stupid to ask, we asked the question, and they were able to tell us, you know, like historical prices, what they think that offer is going to go for with the cash on top, so like realistic offers to put in if they think you're paying too much or too little for it, and if it was likely to go through or not, and also how competitive it is, so how many other offers there are on a flat. So really use your solicitor while you're paying them, so ask them however much stuff you want. And finding a solicitor and a mortgage advisor that you really like get on with and you don't mind just asking silly questions makes the process a lot easier as well, especially when, you know, you have these like late night worries or late night queries. You can just message them at any time and you feel comfortable doing that. It really helps the whole process, which can be quite stressful at the end of the day. Do not get blinded by the fact that this is possibly your first home. It's so easy to fall in love with a place, especially if the sellers have tactfully decorated everything and got stuff redone and made it look really nice. But always have an investor mindset. Even if it is your first home and forever home, always have that investor mindset. You never know what could happen in the future, so you always need to act smart, especially when you're parting with this much money. Consider everything for this. External factors like the surrounding area, council tax, parking, nearest amenities, possible rental prices, Airbnbs in the building. In Edinburgh, flats are commonly let out during the Fringe Festival because of how many people come to the city, and it's a way that homeowners use to make money, like short-term rental from the flat. So considering even that and like the potential of that could factor into the kind of offer you make. Is the flat near a busy road? Is there a supermarket in walking distance? How much essential repair work would you have to immediately do to the flat, like I mentioned before? Could a family live there in the future? Could pets be there in the future? Would it suit students and professionals if you were to rent out, sell it later on? And what's the area like around it? Is it up and coming? Is it not so up and coming? Is it safe? For example, in Edinburgh, the tram line has affected the values of property around it being developed, so that's going up to Leith. In Edinburgh, you had to be so quick that unfortunately you could barely even consider whether you actually liked the flat or not sometimes. So utilize viewings really well, and like I said before, really quiz the owner on everything you need to know. Ask them about neighbors, bills, the state of the garden, who looks after the garden, who tends to look after, you know, the property, like the communal areas, if there's a factor, how and when that factor is paid, previous work has been done in the flat, what they've done, what they've hired someone else to do, if there are warranties or guarantees on anything, and also in terms of work that they've done, have they made any major repairs that you would need to keep an eye on? Like, do they have a troublesome roof? Do they have a troublesome tiny little corner of the flat that always leaks? Find everything out and let them know that, you know, this isn't stuff that you're using to put yourself off the flat. It's just things that you need to know as a buyer, as a potential owner of the place in the future. And the final thing is to just really consider the value of the place you're buying versus the street that it's on versus any work that it potentially needs done. And by this, I'm going to use an example I was speaking about with a friend. They have a top floor flat and they have the potential to convert the attic into a couple of bedrooms. Now on their street, there are no flats where the attic is converted into a couple of bedrooms, i.e. it's a 5-bedroom flat. So the cost of converting the attic space into bedrooms won't be returned by a potential higher price in the flat, because her road has a ceiling on the highest flat value and you can't really push past that ceiling, and it will get to a point where it doesn't matter how many repairs and cool things you do to the flat, you are not going to get necessarily all of that back if you ever sold it. If the flat needs a lot of work done, will all the money that it takes to do all the work be returned via the average house price value of a similar condition flat on that road? I hope that was understandable in some kind of way, but it's something that you have to really think about, especially if you have it stuck in your head that you need to redo something or that something needs to be improved or repaired. Like, does it really, and does it even matter in terms of budget? So those were a couple of tips I had for the flat buying process in Edinburgh. I hope you managed to find some of these useful if you are in that process, and if you are going through the process, best of luck, and I hope you get the flat of your dreams and that it's not a stressful process, because this really can be really stressful. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next week. Bye.